The pot roast was getting cold. Bob Hendricks sat at the head of the dinner table, same spot for 18 years, watching his wife push peas around her plate. Tyler and Emma kept their eyes down. Something in the air felt wrong, like the smell before a thunderstorm. Linda set down her fork. The clink against china sounded too loud. "I want a real man," she said, flat, clinical. "Not whatever you are." Bob's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Tyler's fork clattered. Emma went perfectly still. "There's someone outside," Linda continued, standing. She was already packed. He could see it now, the suitcase by the door he'd walked past 20 minutes ago. "His name is Marcus. He owns things. He makes me feel alive." Through the window, Bob saw the BMW idling in the driveway, a younger man behind the wheel, watching the house like he owned it. Linda kissed both children on the head. "Say goodbye to your father." But that was only the beginning. Bob didn't move for a long time after the front door closed. The BMW's engine faded down Maple Street, and still he sat there, staring at the cold pot roast. Tyler broke first. 14 years old, voice cracking. "Dad? Finish your dinner," Bob heard himself say. "But Mom just—" "I said finish your dinner." Emma, 11, started crying without sound. Her shoulders shook, but she made no noise, like she'd learned early that quiet tears bothered people less. Bob pushed back from the table. His chair scraped the linoleum, the same floor he'd installed himself when Tyler was a baby. Everything in this house he'd built or fixed or paid for. The kitchen cabinets he'd sanded and painted. The new roof after the storm in '09. The wheelchair ramp he'd constructed when Linda came home from the hospital, too weak to manage the porch steps. 6 months ago, she couldn't walk to the mailbox without stopping to catch her breath. Now she was kissing some dealership owner in a $70,000 car. "You two get ready for bed," Bob said. "School tomorrow." "Dad, are you—" "Now, Tyler." They left their plates. Bob heard them whispering in the hallway, then Tyler's door closing, then Emma's. The house settled into silence. Bob picked up Linda's plate. She'd eaten maybe 3 bites. He scraped it into the trash, washed it, dried it, put it back in the cabinet. Muscle memory. 18 years of the same routine. The coffee pot was still half full. He poured a cup, stood at the sink, looked out at the backyard, the tire swing he'd hung for Emma, the garden beds Linda used to tend before the chemo, the garage where he'd taught Tyler to change oil. His hands didn't shake. That surprised him. They were steady on the coffee cup, rough, calloused 64 years of honest work written in scars and crooked fingers. Factory hands, carpenter hands, not exciting hands, apparently. Not real man hands. George Patterson's porch light came on next door. A minute later, someone knocked. Bob knew that knock. 3 solid raps, cop knock, even though George had been retired from the force for 5 years. Bob opened the door. George stood there in his cardigan, white hair catching the porch light. "Saw the BMW leave." He didn't ask, just stated facts. "She's gone," Bob said. "Kids?" "Upstairs." George nodded. "Want company or solitude?" That was George, never assumed, always asked. "Company, I guess." They sat on the porch steps. October air, cold enough to need a jacket. George pulled out his pipe but didn't light it. His wife made him quit smoking, but he still carried it for comfort. "The Thornton boy?" George finally asked. "Marcus Thornton. Owns 3 dealerships." "Know him. Sits on the hospital board." George's jaw tightened. Interesting timing. "What do you mean?" "Linda's treatments. Lots of insurance paperwork goes through hospital administration." George turned the pipe over in his hands. "You still paying off that second mortgage?" Bob nodded. $127,000. Borrowed against the house because the insurance didn't cover everything. Linda needed the best care, the clinical trials, the specialists in Indianapolis. Worth it, he'd thought. You don't put a price on your wife's life. "How much of that mortgage is left?" George asked. "About 90,000. Why?" George didn't answer right away. Down the street, Mrs. Henderson's dog barked. A car passed, slowing down to look at Bob's house. Small town. Word would spread by morning. Just thinking, George said finally. Awful convenient. Hospital administrator helps expedite your insurance claims. Your wife survives. Suddenly she's got a new man with money and connections. Bob felt something cold settle in his stomach. You saying this was planned? I'm saying I've been a cop for 30 years. I've seen patterns. George stood up, knees cracking. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard. Small town like this, everybody's going to have an opinion. Let them talk. Bob. George's voice went serious. When a woman leaves a man after he's taken care of her through cancer, people choose sides. You need to understand that some folks are going to choose hers. She's going to tell a story. Make sure you've got your facts straight. The facts are, I took care of my wife, that's all. Good men think facts matter. Rich men know stories matter more. George tapped his pipe against the railing. Document everything. Receipts, emails, text messages, everything. Why would I need? Just do it. George's eyes were cop eyes now. Trust me. After George left, Bob sat alone on the porch. The wicker chair creaked under his weight. Linda's chair, the one she used to sit in with her morning tea. Before the cancer, before everything, he pulled out his phone. No messages, no missed calls. He opened the text thread with Linda. The last message was from him, 3 hours ago. Making pot roast for dinner. Home by 6? She'd read it, blue checkmark. No response. He scrolled up. Weeks of one-sided conversations. Need anything from the store? Your prescription is ready. Tyler's game at 4. Read receipts on all of them. Responses on none. How long had he been talking to a ghost? Inside, he heard footsteps. Tyler appeared in the doorway, still dressed, face red. Is she coming back? Bob wanted to say yes, wanted to promise everything would be fine. But he'd never lied to his kids. I don't know, buddy. Did you do something wrong? The question hit like a fist. No, I don't think so. Then why did she leave? Sometimes people... Bob stopped. How do you explain this to a 14-year-old? Sometimes people change. Sometimes what they want changes. She said you weren't a real man. Tyler's voice cracked. What does that mean? Bob looked at his son. Skinny kid, all elbows and acne, standing in the doorway in a Minecraft t-shirt. Still young enough to believe his father had all the answers. It means I'm not whatever she needed me to be, Bob said quietly. But I'm still your dad. That doesn't change. Tyler nodded, not really understanding but accepting it the way kids do. He went back upstairs. Bob sat in the dark for another hour. Somewhere around midnight, a text came through. Linda, my lawyer will contact you about the children. Don't make this difficult. Bob read it 3 times. The children. Not our children. Not even Tyler and Emma. The children, like they were assets. Property to be divided. He thought about responding. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard. What do you even say to that? He set the phone down. Went inside. Locked the door, something he rarely did in this neighborhood, but tonight felt different. The house was too quiet. He could hear the refrigerator humming, the furnace clicking on, the old floorboards settling, sounds he'd lived with for nearly 2 decades, but tonight they felt unfamiliar. In the bedroom, Linda's side of the closet gaped empty. She must have packed while he was at work, planned it, timed it, waited for him to come home and make dinner like nothing was wrong. Her nightstand was cleared, her lotions and reading glasses gone, but on his nightstand, the battered one he'd built in his garage, sat their wedding photo, 18 years ago. Linda in white, him in the only suit he owned, both of them young and stupid and sure. He picked it up. In the photo, she was looking at him like he was everything. When had that look died? He set the frame face down and turned off the light. Tomorrow, George said, would be hard. Bob had survived the factory layoffs, his first divorce, his father's death, and 6 months of watching his wife fight for her life. Hard, he could handle. But as he lay in the dark, listening to the empty house, one question wouldn't leave him alone. What kind of lawyer was she talking about? The lawyer's letter arrived 3 days later. Bob was in the garage, changing the oil on his truck, a '98 Ford with 200,000 miles and a rebuilt transmission. The kind of vehicle you kept running through stubbornness and elbow grease. Tyler used to help with this, handing him wrenches, asking questions about torque and viscosity. Now, Tyler barely spoke to him. Emma knocked on the garage door frame. She held a thick envelope, the kind with a law firm's return address embossed in the corner. "This came," she said quietly. Bob wiped his hands on a rag. The envelope was heavy, expensive paper. He opened it standing there in the garage, surrounded by tools and motor oil smell. Petition for emergency custody modification and restraining order. The words blurred together at first, then they sharpened into focus. Emotionally abusive during medical crisis. Neglectful of children's basic needs. Financially irresponsible, placing family at risk. Respondent shall have no contact with minor children. Bob read it twice, then a third time. "Dad?" Emma's voice was small. "What does it say?" He looked at his daughter, blonde hair in a ponytail, Linda's eyes, his stubborn chin. 11 years old and already learning that the world was meaner than anyone let on. "Says we have to go to court," he managed. "Are we in trouble?" "No, baby. You're not in trouble. But I am," he thought. "I'm in more trouble than I knew existed." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Bob called in sick to work, first time in 8 years, and drove to the county courthouse in his church clothes. The suit was 15 years old, tight in the shoulders, but it was all he had. George had recommended a lawyer. "Kevin Morrison handled my daughter's custody case. Good man. Won't rob you blind." Kevin Morrison met him in the hallway outside courtroom 3, mid-50s, gray suit, briefcase with actual scuff marks. He shook Bob's hand and got right to it. "I've reviewed the petition. We're fighting an emergency restraining order and temporary custody modification. Do you understand what that means?" "She wants to keep the kids away from me." "Correct. And if the judge grants it today, you won't be allowed within 500 feet of them or the family home until the full hearing. That could be months." Bob felt the floor shift. "On what grounds? I never touched her. Never touched the kids. I worked 2 jobs to pay for her treatments." "Mr. Hendricks." Kevin's voice was kind but firm. "What you did or didn't do doesn't matter today. What matters is what she's claiming and whether the judge believes there's enough risk to grant a temporary order. These hearings are about immediate safety, not ultimate truth." "So she can just lie?" "She can claim anything. We'll get our chance to respond at the full hearing." Kevin checked his watch. "Her lawyer is Christine Waverly. Very expensive. Very good. She doesn't usually take domestic cases unless there's serious money involved." "Where's Linda getting that kind of money?" Kevin's expression said he already knew the answer. "Marcus Thornton is listed as a co-petitioner. He's covering her legal fees." The courtroom door opened. A woman emerged, 40-something, designer suit, briefcase that probably cost more than Bob's truck. She looked at Kevin, then at Bob, and her expression was pure professional assessment, measuring, calculating. Behind her came Linda. Bob hadn't seen her in 3 days, but she looked different. New haircut, expensive. Makeup professionally done, a navy dress that probably cost $600, and next to her, hand on her lower back, was Marcus Thornton. Early 50s, fit like he lived at the gym, tan in October. Watch that caught the fluorescent light. He looked at Bob the way you'd look at a broken appliance you were replacing. Linda didn't meet Bob's eyes. "Mr. Hendricks." Christine Waverly extended her hand. Professional courtesy. Bob shook it because he didn't know what else to do. "I hope we can resolve this amicably. My client simply wants what's best for the children during this difficult transition." "Transition?" Bob's voice came out rougher than he intended. "She left 3 days ago. And Mr. Hendricks has made no attempt to give her space or respect her decision," Waverly continued smoothly. "He's sent numerous text messages, driven past Mr. Thornton's residence and created an uncomfortable environment for the children. That's not... I sent 2 texts asking if the kids were okay. I drove past because it's on my way to work." Waverly smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "We can discuss this inside." The judge was a woman in her 60s, reading glasses on a chain, nameplate that read Hans and Patricia Kerrigan. She reviewed the petition while they all stood. "This is a preliminary hearing on an emergency petition," Judge Kerrigan said. "Mrs. Hendricks, your attorney may present the basis for emergency relief." Christine Waverly stood. "Your Honor, my client endured months of emotional abuse during her cancer treatment. Mr. Hendricks repeatedly told her she was a burden, controlled all financial decisions, isolated her from friends and family, and created an environment of fear and dependency." Bob started to stand. Kevin grabbed his arm, held him down. "The children have provided statements corroborating this pattern of behavior. They describe a father who yells constantly, shows favoritism, and made their mother cry on numerous occasions during her illness." "That's a lie," Bob hissed to Kevin. "Let her finish," Kevin whispered back. "My client fears for her emotional safety and for the children's well-being if Mr. Hendricks continues to have unrestricted access. She requests a temporary restraining order and emergency custody modification while we proceed to a full hearing." Judge Kerrigan looked at Kevin. "Response?" Kevin stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Hendricks categorically denies these allegations. He worked 2 jobs to pay for his wife's cancer treatment, took out a second mortgage on the family home, and provided round-the-clock care during her chemotherapy. The timing of these accusations, 3 days after Mrs. Hendricks left the marriage for another man, is suspect at best." "Objection," Waverly cut in. "My client's personal relationships are not relevant to the question of whether the children are at risk." "Sustained," Judge Kerrigan said. "Mr. Morrison, do you have evidence refuting the allegations?" "We will at the full hearing, Your Honor. But this petition was filed less than a week after Mrs. Hendricks left the home. There's been no investigation, no substantiation." "The children's statements constitute substantiation," Waverly interrupted. "We've submitted them under seal." Judge Kerrigan picked up a document. "Read it." Her expression didn't change. "I'm going to grant a temporary restraining order," she said. "Mr. Hendricks, you are not to contact your wife or children except through supervised visitation to be arranged by the court. You are not to come within 500 feet of the family residence or the children's school. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place until the full custody hearing, which I'm scheduling for." She checked her calendar, January 15th, 3 months from now. Bob felt the air leave his lungs. "Your Honor," Kevin tried. "My ruling stands. Mrs. Hendricks, you'll maintain primary custody during this period. Mr. Hendricks, you'll be notified about supervised visitation. We're adjourned." The gavel came down. Bob stood there while the courtroom emptied. Kevin was talking, saying something about appeals, about building their case, about documentation. But Bob couldn't hear him over the ringing in his ears. Linda walked past without looking at him. Marcus's hand was on her back again, proprietary, guiding her. In the hallway, Tyler and Emma stood with a woman Bob didn't recognize. Social services, probably. Emma saw him and started forward, but the woman held her back. "Dad!" Emma called out. The bailiff stepped between them. "Sir, the order is effective immediately." "That's my daughter. Sir, I need you to step back." Tyler was crying. 14 years old, trying not to, but his face was red and his shoulders were shaking. Emma was pulling against the social worker's hand. Bob raised his hands, stepped back. "It's okay," he called to them. "It's going to be okay." But they were already being led away, down the hall, around the corner. Gone. George was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against Bob's truck. He took one look at Bob's face and knew. They granted it? Bob nodded. He couldn't speak. Supervised visitation only? Another nod. George pulled out his pipe, still unlit, turned it over in his hands. "We need to get you a better lawyer." "Kevin's good. He's just—" They had the kids' statements. The judge read them. "What did they say?" "I don't know. They're sealed. But whatever it was—" Bob's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. Whatever they said, the judge believed it. A BMW pulled out of the parking lot, Marcus driving, Linda in the passenger seat. In the back, Bob could see 2 small shapes. His children, being driven away by a man who'd known them for maybe a month. "Come on," George said. "Let's get you home." "That's not my home anymore. The restraining order. You've got the garage apartment. It's not much, but it's got a bed and a hot plate." George opened the truck door. "You're not doing this alone." Bob climbed in, started the engine. The radio came on. Classic country, the station Linda always complained about. He turned it off. As they pulled onto Main Street, Bob saw Mrs. Henderson on her porch, watching. She turned away when she saw him looking. 2 doors down, the Kowalskis were in their yard. They went inside when Bob's truck passed. The split had begun. Small town. Everybody choosing sides. And Bob was learning what George had tried to warn him about. When a beautiful woman with cancer says her husband was cruel, people believe her. When that husband is an old factory worker with rough hands and a 15-year-old suit, they believe her even more. At the stoplight, Bob looked in the rearview mirror. He barely recognized the man looking back. 3 days ago, he'd been a father. Now he was a stranger his own children were being protected from. The light turned green, but Bob sat there until someone honked. The question wasn't how this had happened anymore. The question was how he was going to survive it. The garage apartment smelled like sawdust and WD-40. One room above George's 2-car garage, accessed by exterior stairs that creaked with each step. A twin bed, a card table, a hot plate, and a bathroom the size of a closet. Bob set his duffel bag on the floor. Everything he owned that mattered fit in one bag: clothes, toiletries, his father's pocket watch, a photo of the kids from last Christmas. George appeared in the doorway with a casserole dish. "Helen made lasagna. Says you need to eat." "Tell her thanks." "Tell her yourself. She's worried about you." George set the dish on the hot plate. "Also, she wants you to know that she doesn't believe a word of what Linda's saying. Neither do half the women at church." "What about the other half?" George didn't answer. Didn't need to. Bob sat on the bed. The mattress was thin, springs poking through. "I can pay rent." "The hell you will." George pulled up the card table's only chair. "You're going to need every dollar for that lawyer. Speaking of which, we need to talk strategy. Kevin says we build our case for the full hearing, gather evidence, refute her claims. That's 3 months away. What are you doing in the meantime?" Bob looked at his hands. "Supervised visitation. If they approve it." "When's the first session?" "Don't know yet. Court has to arrange it." Bob's throat tightened. "George, those statements the kids gave. What if they really believe I was cruel? What if Linda's convinced them? Kids don't forget who loved them." George's voice was firm. "Tyler and Emma know who you are. Maybe they're confused right now. Maybe they're scared. But they know." Bob wanted to believe that. Wasn't sure he could. The call from Family Services came 5 days later. Supervised visitation approved. 1 hour per week. Saturdays at 10 a.m. at the Family Services building on Oakmont Street. Bob arrived 20 minutes early. The building was institutional. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, plastic chairs bolted to the floor. A woman with a clipboard checked him in. "Mr. Hendricks, I'm Donna Ramirez. I'll be supervising today's visit." She was maybe 30, social work degree, probably still fresh, eyes that had already seen too much. "The children will be here shortly. I need to go over the rules. No physical contact without permission. No discussion of the court case. No speaking negatively about their mother. No gifts unless pre-approved. No promises about the future." "Basically," Bob said, "pretend I'm a stranger." Donna's expression softened slightly. "I know this is hard, but these rules protect everyone." Tyler and Emma arrived at 10:03. Linda dropped them off. Bob watched through the window as she stayed in the car, Marcus in the driver's seat, making sure Bob stayed inside, making sure the restraining order held. The kids walked in like they were going to the dentist. Emma saw Bob and stopped. Her face crumpled. She started toward him, then looked at Donna, uncertain. "It's okay," Donna said gently. "You can hug your dad if you want." Emma ran. Bob caught her, and for the first time in a week, something in his chest loosened. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo Linda always bought, and her arms around his neck were the realest thing he'd felt in days. Tyler hung back, hands in his pockets, 14 years old and trying to be tough, but his eyes were red. "Hey, buddy," Bob said. Tyler nodded, didn't come closer. They moved to a small room with a table and chairs. Donna sat in the corner with her clipboard, trying to be invisible but present. Recording everything. Bob had prepared things to say, planned conversations. But now, sitting across from his children in a government building, everything felt wrong. "How's school?" he finally asked. "Fine," Tyler muttered. "Emma, how's Mrs. Patterson's class?" "Okay." She was staring at the table. Silence. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. "I miss you guys," Bob said. The words came out rougher than he intended. Emma's eyes filled. Tyler's jaw clenched. "Mom says," Tyler started, then stopped. Looked at Donna. Back at Bob. "Never mind. You can talk to me about anything," Bob said. "Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling." "Can we come home?" Emma whispered. Bob felt his heart crack. "I'm working on it, baby." "Mom says you did bad things, that you made her cry during the cancer." Tyler's voice was defensive, rehearsed. "She says you controlled everything, that you were mean." Bob looked at his son, saw Linda's words coming out of his mouth. "Do you believe that?" Tyler's eyes dropped. "I don't know what to believe." "Look at me, Ty." Slowly, Tyler raised his eyes. "I worked 2 jobs to pay for your mom's treatment," Bob said quietly. "I slept in a hospital chair for 3 months. I learned how to cook because she couldn't eat regular food. I drove her to Indianapolis every Tuesday for chemo, 2 hours each way." He paused. "Did any of that feel mean to you?" Tyler's face twisted. "Then why did she leave?" Sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make sense to anybody else. Even to themselves. "That's not an answer," Tyler shot back. "I know." Bob spread his hands on the table. "But it's the only one I've got right now." Emma reached across the table, touched Bob's hand. "I want to come home." "Me too, baby." "Mom's new house is big," she said. "But it doesn't smell right. And Mr. Marcus is always there. He smiles a lot, but his eyes don't smile." Bob filed that away. Kids saw things adults missed. "Does he treat you okay?" Emma shrugged. "He bought us stuff, new iPads, new clothes. He took us to a fancy restaurant." She picked at her thumbnail. "But he calls you the old guy. He says you're probably happier without us anyway." Bob's hands curled into fists under the table. He forced them to relax. "That's not true. There's not a minute of the day I'm not thinking about you two." "Then fight for us," Tyler said suddenly. His voice cracked. "Stop sitting around feeling sorry for yourself and fight." The words hit like a slap. "I am fighting." "You let her take us. You just stood there in court. You didn't even try." "Tyler, everyone says you gave up. That you always give up when things get hard." Tyler was crying now, angry tears. "Is that true? Are you going to give up on us too?" Donna started to intervene, but Bob held up a hand. "No," he said. "I'm not giving up. And I didn't just stand there. I'm following the law so I can keep seeing you. If I'd caused a scene in that courtroom, they'd have taken away even these visits." He leaned forward. "Listen to me, both of you. I'm fighting, but I'm fighting smart, not loud. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is be patient." "That sounds like giving up with extra words," Tyler muttered. Bob almost smiled. His son's stubbornness, that came from him. "You remember when we rebuilt the truck's engine last year?" Bob asked. Tyler nodded reluctantly. "Remember how long it took? Months. And you wanted to rush it, wanted to fire it up and see if it worked. But I made you check every bolt, every gasket, every connection. You said I was being too slow." "And then it worked," Tyler admitted quietly. "Because we did it right. Not fast, right." Bob held his son's eyes. "That's what I'm doing now, building the case, one bolt at a time. And when we get to that courtroom in January, everything's going to work. I promise you. You can't promise that, Tyler said. But his voice had lost its edge. Emma pulled something from her backpack. A drawing, folded into quarters. She slid it across the table. Bob unfolded it. A house. Their house. A family of 4 in front. Him, Linda, Tyler, Emma. Stick figures holding hands. In the corner, she'd written in careful letters, "Before." "I drew another one," Emma whispered. "Of now. But I didn't bring it." "Why not?" "Because it made me too sad." Bob refolded the drawing, tucked it in his shirt pocket. "Can I keep this one?" She nodded. Donna checked her watch. 5 more minutes. 5 minutes. 60 seconds times 5. Not enough to repair a week's worth of damage. Not enough to undo whatever poison Linda was dripping in their ears every day. "Listen," Bob said. "I need you two to remember something. Whatever your mom says, whatever Mr. Marcus says, whatever anyone says, you know who I am. You've lived with me your whole lives. Trust that. Trust what you know." "But what if what we thought we knew was wrong?" Tyler asked. "What if we just didn't see it?" And there it was, the seed of doubt, planted and growing. "Did I ever hit your mom?" Bob asked. "No." "Did I ever hit either of you?" "No," Emma said. "Did I miss your baseball games, Ty? Your recitals, Emma?" Tyler shook his head. "Then trust that. Trust the dad who showed up." "Who taught you how to fish and how to change a tire and how to make scrambled eggs without burning them?" Bob's voice was steady, but his hands trembled. "The rest is just noise." Donna stood. "Time's up. Too fast. Always too fast." Emma hugged Bob again. Tyler hesitated, then stuck out his hand for a shake, man to man. Bob pulled him into a hug anyway. Felt Tyler resist for half a second, then collapse into it. "I love you both," Bob said into Tyler's hair. "That never changes, no matter what anyone says." "Love you too, Dad," Emma whispered. Tyler didn't say it, but he held on longer than he needed to. Then they were gone, led back to the waiting room, back to Linda's car, back to Marcus Thornton's big house that didn't smell right. Bob sat alone in the visiting room. Donna gathered her clipboard. "Mr. Hendricks, they love you. I can see it. But they're doubting. They're children. They're confused. But love doesn't disappear in a week." She paused at the door. For what it's worth, I've seen a lot of these cases. The kids who are actually afraid of their parents. They don't hug like that." After she left, Bob sat there for another 10 minutes. The drawing in his pocket felt heavy. Before. Such a small word for everything he'd lost. But Emma had drawn it, had labeled it, had brought it to show him, which meant she remembered, which meant there was still hope. George was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against the truck. "How'd it go?" "They're scared. Confused." Bob climbed into the driver's seat. "But they're still my kids." "Damn right they are." On the way home, Bob kept his hand over the drawing in his pocket. 1 hour a week, 60 minutes to remind them who he was. It wasn't enough, but it was something. And something, Bob was learning, was all you needed to keep fighting. The envelope was waiting on the garage apartment steps when Bob got home from his Tuesday shift at the hardware store. He'd picked up part-time work stocking shelves, anything to keep busy, anything to pay Kevin Morrison's retainer. George's porch light was on. He was watching from his kitchen window. That's how Bob knew this envelope was bad news. George only watched like that when he was worried. Bob opened it standing there in the cold. Motion to modify child support and asset division. He scanned the legal language, heart sinking with each paragraph. Linda was claiming he'd hidden assets, that the second mortgage was taken out without her consent, that he'd forged her signature on the loan documents. His vision went red around the edges. He'd forged her signature. After she'd been too weak from chemo to sign, had asked him, begged him, to handle the paperwork. "Just get me the treatment, Bob. I trust you. Do whatever you need to do." And now she was calling it fraud. The motion went further. She wanted full ownership of the house. Wanted Bob to continue paying the mortgage on a home he couldn't enter for a wife who'd left him while she lived rent-free with Marcus Thornton. And the child support. She was asking for $2,400 a month. Bob did the math in his head. His pension was $1,800 a month. The hardware store paid $12 an hour, part-time. After taxes, he brought home maybe $2,200 total. They were going to bleed him dry. He called Kevin Morrison from the steps. "I just got served," Bob said. "The asset motion. Yeah, I got a copy this afternoon." Kevin sounded tired. "It's aggressive. It's insane. I can't pay $2,400 a month in rent and legal fees." Which is the point. They're trying to force you into a corner. Either you agree to give up the house and reduce your custody claim, or you fight and go bankrupt. Bob leaned against the railing. The wood was cold, damp from evening fog. "What do I do?" We respond. "Show you didn't forge anything. She consented verbally. We'll get hospital staff to testify she was oriented and capable of giving consent. We'll show the mortgage went entirely to her medical care. We'll argue she's living rent-free with a wealthy man and doesn't need excessive support." "Will it work?" Kevin paused. "Depends on the judge, and juries tend to sympathize with cancer survivors." "Even when they're lying?" "Especially then, because it's hard to believe someone would weaponize cancer." Kevin's voice softened. "Bob, I need you to find those medical bills. Every receipt, every hospital statement, every insurance form. If we can prove every dollar of that mortgage went to her care, we can beat this. But we need documentation." After he hung up, Bob sat on the steps until full dark. George came out eventually, 2 beers in hand. "Saw the envelope," George said. "She's claiming I forged her signature. Wants the house, wants child support I can't afford." Bob took the beer but didn't open it. "She's going to take everything." "Not if we prove where the money went." "I don't have receipts for everything. Some of it was cash, co-pays, parking, meals when I stayed at the hospital. Some of the holistic stuff insurance didn't cover." Bob rubbed his face. "I wasn't thinking about documentation. I was thinking about keeping her alive." "Where'd you keep the bills you did save?" "Filing cabinet. In the house." The house he couldn't enter. The house that was about to become Linda's sole property. George pulled out his phone. "Let me make a call." 20 minutes later, they were sitting in Kevin Morrison's office. Kevin had called in a favor, emergency motion for Bob to retrieve personal property from the marital residence. "We'll ask for a sheriff's escort," Kevin explained. "You get 1 hour to collect documents, personal items, clothing. Anything that's clearly yours." "When?" Judge Kerrigan's clerk said tomorrow at 4 p.m. if the motion's granted. "That's the judge who granted the restraining order." "I know, but she's also bound by law. You have a right to your property." The motion was granted. Thursday at 4 p.m., Bob pulled up to his own house with a sheriff's deputy and George as his witness. The house looked different. Linda had changed the wreath on the door. Expensive, professional, nothing like the homemade one Emma used to make from pine cones. The yard was immaculate. Marcus's money at work. The deputy unlocked the door. "1 hour, sir. Touch only what's clearly yours." Bob stepped inside. It smelled wrong. New air freshener, floral and chemical. The furniture was rearranged. The TV was new, massive, expensive. Marcus's touch everywhere. But in the corner, Bob could still see the marks on the wall where Tyler had measured his height each birthday. The doorframe to the kitchen still had the dent from when Bob had dropped the toolbox moving in, his life being slowly erased. George went straight for the filing cabinet in the den. Bob headed upstairs. His clothes were still in the bedroom closet, shoved to one side. He pulled down a suitcase, started packing. In the drawer of his nightstand, he found his father's pocket knife, a stack of birthday cards from the kids, a photo of him and his own dad from 30 years ago. Then he saw it. On Linda's nightstand, the one that used to be Linda's nightstand, a bottle of prescription medication. He picked it up. Anti-anxiety pills, prescribed 3 months ago. 3 months ago, she'd still been living here, still been his wife. But the prescribing doctor was from Indianapolis. The pharmacy was in Indianapolis. Linda's oncologist was in Indianapolis. Bob pocketed the bottle. He didn't know what it meant, but his gut said it mattered. Downstairs, George had found the filing cabinet. It was locked. "You got a key?" George asked. "Kitchen drawer." But when Bob opened the drawer, the key ring was gone. Every key, house keys, file cabinet, safety deposit box. "She took them," Bob said. The deputy checked his watch. 43 minutes left, sir." George looked at the file cabinet, looked at the deputy. "You didn't see this." The deputy turned around, suddenly fascinated by the bookshelf. George pulled a screwdriver from his pocket. Old cop habits die hard, and popped the lock in 30 seconds. The cabinet was empty. Every file, every folder, every receipt and hospital bill and insurance statement, gone. "Son of a bitch," George breathed. Bob opened drawer after drawer, all empty. "She knew we'd come for these," George said. "Probably cleaned it out the day she left." Bob's hands shook as he closed the last drawer. Without those documents, he couldn't prove the mortgage went to medical bills. Couldn't prove he hadn't forged signatures for personal gain. Well, couldn't prove anything. "Check the garage," George said. "Sometimes people keep old bills in boxes." The garage was pristine. Tyler's bike was gone, probably at Marcus's house. Bob's toolbox was still on the workbench, but his power tools were missing. The storage shelves were bare. Except, in the far corner, behind a stack of paint cans, Bob saw a cardboard box. Old, dusty, forgotten. He pulled it out. On the side, in his own handwriting from years ago, "Tax docs, 2019 to 2022. Inside, bank statements, credit card bills, mortgage papers. And underneath those, a manila folder labeled medical. Bob's hands trembled as he opened it. There, hospital bills from Linda's treatment. Not all of them. Not even most of them. But some. Enough to trace a timeline. Enough to show where at least part of the money went. "George?" George came over, saw the folder, and exhaled. "That'll help. Not a smoking gun, but it'll help." Why would she leave this? Because she forgot it existed. Because she was in a hurry. Because even smart people make mistakes. George checked over his shoulder. The deputy was still studiously ignoring them. "Take it. Take everything in this box." Bob carried it to the truck, came back for one more sweep. In Tyler's room, he found a baseball glove tucked under the bed, the one Bob had given him for his 12th birthday, broken in and perfect. Tyler's favorite, left behind. In Emma's room, her drawings were gone, all except one, half-finished, crumpled in the trash. She'd drawn the family again, but this time Marcus was in the picture. She'd crossed him out, then crossed out the whole thing. Bob smoothed it out, folded it carefully, put it in his pocket next to the before drawing. "Time's up," the deputy called. Bob took one last look at the house. At the kitchen where he'd made 18 years of dinners. At the living room where they'd watched movies on Friday nights. At the stairs where Tyler had taken his first steps. "All of it someone else's now. Let's go," he told George. As they pulled away, Bob saw the curtain move in the upstairs window. Someone had been watching, waiting for him to leave. He wondered if it was Linda or Marcus, or maybe one of his kids forbidden from coming downstairs while he was there. Back at the garage apartment, George helped Bob spread the documents across the card table. "It's not enough," Bob said, staring at the incomplete paper trail. "We've got maybe 40% of the bills. The rest is still out there somewhere. Hospital records, insurance claims. There's always a paper trail." George pulled out his phone. "I've got a buddy who works in medical records at County General. Let me see what I can do." But Bob wasn't listening. He was staring at the prescription bottle he'd taken from Linda's nightstand. Anti-anxiety medication. Prescribed by Dr. Sarah Chen. Linda's oncologist was Dr. Richard Kapoor. He Googled Dr. Sarah Chen. Psychiatrist. Specializing in cosmetic surgery patients. Bob's blood went cold. "George, look at this." George read the bottle. His face went hard. 3 months ago, during her treatment, she was seeing a psychiatrist who specializes in cosmetic surgery. Bob pulled up Dr. Chen's website. Located at Indianapolis Medical Plaza. Same building as... He clicked through. There it was. Thornton Medical Group. Marcus Thornton, administrator. She was planning this, Bob said slowly. Before the cancer was even finished, she met Marcus at the hospital, started seeing a psychiatrist for post-surgery counseling, and started planning her exit. Can you prove that? George asked. Bob couldn't. The prescriptions didn't prove anything except that Linda had anxiety. And who wouldn't, fighting cancer? But the location, the timing, the specialist. I can't prove it, Bob admitted, but I know it's true. George sat down heavy. Even if you could prove it, would it matter? So she met him during treatment. That's not a crime. But if she was planning to leave me before the treatment was even finished, if she was using my money, my second mortgage, my sacrifice, while already planning to run off with him, it makes her a liar, but not a criminal. George's voice was gentle. And judges don't punish people for being liars, Bob. They punish people for breaking laws. Bob set the pill bottle down, felt the walls closing in. Linda had outplayed him at every turn, taken the documents he needed, secured expensive lawyers, turned the kids against him. And now she was going to take the house, take his money, and leave him with supervised visitation once a week. I'm going to lose, Bob said. Aren't I? George was quiet for a long time. Maybe, he finally said. Maybe not. But I'll tell you what you're not going to do. You're not going to quit. Why not? She's got better lawyers, more money. The kids believe her. Because Tyler asked you not to. Because Emma drew you that picture. Because somewhere deep down, those kids still know who their father is. George leaned forward. And because letting Marcus Thornton win means accepting that money beats truth. You ready to accept that? Bob looked at the scattered documents, the incomplete proof, the uphill battle. No, he said quietly. Then we keep fighting. But that night, lying in the narrow bed in George's garage, Bob felt the weight of it all crushing down. He'd fought cancer and won. Now he was fighting his wife and losing. Outside, it started to rain. Soft at first, then harder. The metal roof amplified every drop. Bob closed his eyes and tried to remember what hope felt like. The diner on Main Street had been there since 1967. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floor, coffee that could strip paint. Bob had been coming here for 20 years, always the corner booth, always the same breakfast, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee. He came on Saturday mornings now, after supervised visitation, needed somewhere to sit that wasn't George's garage, needed to be around people, even if they whispered when he walked in. Rita Delgado had been serving him for a decade. Late 50s, gray hair pulled back, comfortable shoes, hands that never stopped moving. She'd seen 3 husbands come and go, raised 2 daughters alone, and didn't take nonsense from anybody. She refilled Bob's coffee without asking. You eating today or just staring at the menu? Just coffee. Bob Hendricks, you've lost 15 pounds since October. That's too much for a man your age. She pulled out her order pad. I'm bringing you the special. You're eating it. Rita. Don't Rita me. I've watched you waste away in this booth for 6 weeks. Enough. She walked off before he could argue. Bob stared out the window. Across the street, the Christmas decorations were going up. Garland on the streetlights. Wreaths on every storefront. Emma loved Christmas. Used to make him drive around looking at lights every December night. This year, she'd be looking at lights with Marcus. Rita came back with a plate. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans. She set it down with a thud. Eat. Bob picked up his fork. The food smelled good. He couldn't remember the last time anything smelled good. Rita slid into the booth across from him. I'm taking my break. You're going to eat, and I'm going to talk, and you're going to listen. Bob took a bite. The meatloaf was perfect, home-style, the way his mother used to make it. I've been serving this town for 32 years, Rita said. I've seen a lot of things. Seen good people get dealt bad hands. Seen bad people skate by on charm. She folded her hands on the table. What I'm seeing now makes me sick. Bob looked up. Linda Hendricks comes in here twice a week, Rita continued. Tuesday afternoons, Thursday mornings, always with Marcus Thornton. Always the same booth, the one by the window where everybody can see them. I don't want to hear about, yes you do, because 3 months ago, she was in here with him before she ever left you. Bob set down his fork. I kept my mouth shut because it wasn't my business. People have coffee with people. Doesn't mean anything. Rita's voice hardened. But I've got ears, and I've heard things. What things? Rita glanced around the diner. Only a handful of customers, none close enough to hear. She leaned in. Last Tuesday, they were talking about the house. Marcus said something about, once the judge signs off, and Linda laughed. Said, he never saw it coming. Rita's eyes were fierce. She's not just taking your house, Bob. She's enjoying it. Bob's hands curled into fists under the table. And yesterday morning, Rita continued, I heard Marcus on the phone. He was in the bathroom, but his voice carries. Talking about expedited claims and insurance reimbursements and how nobody checks medical billing close enough. She paused. Sounded to me like someone bragging about getting away with something. Bob's mind raced. Medical billing, insurance reimbursements. Marcus worked hospital administration. You're saying he committed fraud? I'm saying I heard a conversation that made my skin crawl. Rita pulled a small notepad from her apron pocket, tore out a page, slid it across. I wrote down what I remember. Dates, times, what was said. It's not much, might be nothing, but I thought you should have it. Bob stared at the paper. Rita's handwriting, neat and precise. A timeline of conversations. Small moments that might add up to something bigger. Why are you doing this? Rita's face softened. Because I remember you sitting in this booth with Linda during her chemo. How you'd order her soup even though she couldn't keep it down, just hoping maybe today she'd eat. How you'd hold her hand while she cried. How you looked like hell but you showed up every Tuesday after her treatment, even though you were working 2 jobs. Her voice cracked slightly. I remember one time she fell asleep right there, head on your shoulder. You sat for 2 hours, didn't move, didn't wake her, just let her rest. Your arm had to be dead, but you didn't move. Bob remembered that day, the ache in his shoulder. Linda's breathing, finally peaceful after weeks of pain, the way the afternoon light came through the window. That's not a cruel man, Rita said. That's not someone who deserved what she's doing to you. Bob folded the paper carefully, put it in his wallet. Thank you. Don't thank me. Use it. Give it to your lawyer. I'll testify if you need me to. You could lose customers. Marcus owns half this town. Let him try. I've survived worse than Marcus Thornton. Rita stood up. Now finish that meatloaf before it gets cold. Bob ate. For the first time in weeks, he tasted the food. The meatloaf was good. The potatoes were real, not instant. The green beans had bacon, small things, but they mattered. When he finished, Rita brought him a slice of apple pie. On the house. Rita, you don't have to. I know I don't. I want to. She refilled his coffee one more time. Bob, you're going to get through this. Maybe not the way you want, maybe not when you want, but you're going to get through it. Bob nodded, not trusting his voice. Outside, the wind picked up. The Christmas decorations swayed. Bob thought about Emma's drawing in his pocket, about Tyler's baseball glove left behind, about everything he'd lost and everything he was fighting for. Then he thought about Rita, choosing to help him when half the town had chosen Linda, one person, one waitress, one timeline of overheard conversations. Maybe that was all you needed, a crack in the armor, a place to start. Bob left a $20 tip on a $12 meal and walked out into the cold December morning. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel quite so alone. But as he reached his truck, he saw it, a parking ticket on the windshield. He picked it up. $150 for parking in a 30-minute zone for 33 minutes. The officer who'd written it was Marcus's brother-in-law. The war wasn't over. It was just getting started. Kevin Morrison spread the files across his desk. Bob's incomplete medical bills, Rita's timeline, the prescription bottle from Indianapolis, the parking ticket, the third one in 2 weeks, all written by the same officer. They're harassing you, Kevin said. Classic intimidation. Can we prove it? 3 tickets in 2 weeks, all borderline violations, all from Marcus's brother-in-law. Yeah, we can prove it, but it won't matter for the custody hearing. Bob sank into the chair. What will matter? Kevin pulled out a document. This came yesterday. Linda's filed for a psych evaluation. She's claiming you're emotionally unstable, possibly a danger to yourself or the children. Based on what? Based on you lurking outside the children's school, sending obsessive text messages, exhibiting signs of depression and erratic behavior. Kevin read from the motion. She has witnesses prepared to testify that you've lost significant weight, stopped attending church, and been seen drinking alone. Bob's face went hot. I had 1 beer with George, on his porch, and I stopped going to church because half the congregation treats me like a leper. I know, but perception is reality in family court. Kevin set down the paper. The evaluation is scheduled for next week. Court-appointed psychologist, Dr. Marcus Webb. Let me guess, another friend of Marcus Thornton? Golf buddy. Sits on the hospital foundation board with him. Kevin's expression was grim. Bob, this is bad. If the psychologist finds you're unstable, we lose any chance at shared custody. You'll be lucky to keep supervised visitation. So what do I do? You show up. You answer honestly. You don't lose your temper. Kevin leaned forward. And you need to start looking like a man who's got his life together. Gain some weight back. Go back to church. Be visible in the community doing normal things. Give them nothing to use against you. After the meeting, Bob sat in his truck in the parking lot. The steering wheel was cold under his hands, looking stable, acting normal, performing sanity for a psychologist who'd already decided the outcome. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Sarah. Your daughter. We need to talk. Bob stared at the screen. Sarah, his daughter from his first marriage. 38 years old. Hadn't spoken to him in 15 years. He called the number. She answered on the second ring. Dad? The word hit him like a freight train. Sarah. I saw the court documents online. Public records. Her voice was tight. Linda's claiming you were abusive, controlling, that you isolated her. It's not true. Long pause. I know. Bob closed his eyes. You do? Because she said the exact same things about you to me. 15 years ago. That you were controlling. That you made her feel small. That she had to protect me from your temper. Sarah's voice cracked. I believed her, Dad. I cut you out of my life because I believed her. Sarah, let me finish. I've been thinking about it since I saw those documents. Really thinking. And I realized I don't actually remember you being cruel. I remember Linda telling me you were cruel. I remember her crying about things you supposedly said, but I don't remember witnessing it. She took a shaky breath. She played me. And now she's playing Tyler and Emma the same way. Bob gripped the phone. Why are you telling me this? Because I can help. I can testify about the pattern, about how she manipulates, about parental alienation. Sarah paused. If you'll let me, if you don't hate me for the 15 years I stole from us. Bob's throat closed. He tried to speak. Couldn't. Dad, you still there? I'm here. His voice was rough. And I could never hate you. Then let me help you. Please. Let me do for Tyler and Emma what nobody did for me. Bob looked at the court building in his rearview mirror, at the parking ticket on his dashboard, at the psych evaluation notice on the passenger seat. For 6 weeks, he'd been losing. Maybe it was time to start winning. Okay, he said. Let's fight. The psych evaluation was scheduled for Wednesday at 2 p.m. Bob showed up 15 minutes early, wearing his church clothes, freshly shaved, forcing himself to eat breakfast even though his stomach rebelled. Dr. Marcus Webb's office was in the medical plaza, same building where Linda had seen Dr. Chen. Same building where Marcus worked. The waiting room had soft music and magazines about golf. Dr. Webb was 60, silver hair, expensive watch, handshake like a politician. "Mr. Hendricks, please sit." The questions started easy. How was he sleeping? Was he eating? Did he have support systems? Then they got sharper. "Your wife claims you were controlling during her illness. Can you speak to that?" "I managed her medications because she asked me to. I drove her to appointments because she couldn't drive herself." "Did you ever prevent her from seeing friends?" "No. Her friends stopped visiting after a while. Chemo is hard to watch." "Did you ever raise your voice to her?" Bob thought carefully. "Maybe. Once or twice. When she tried to refuse treatment. When she wanted to give up." Dr. Webb made a note. "So you did yell at her?" "I yelled, 'Don't quit,' when she was talking about stopping chemo. Is that abuse or desperation?" More notes. More questions. How did he feel about Linda's new relationship? Did he harbor resentment? Had he experienced violent thoughts? 2 hours of interrogation disguised as concern. At the end, Dr. Webb smiled. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Hendricks. My report will be submitted to the court within a week." Bob knew. He knew by the smile, by the tone, by the way Dr. Webb had already started organizing his notes before Bob left the room. The evaluation was a formality. The conclusion was already written. That night, Bob sat in the garage apartment with a bottle of whiskey, the same bottle George had poured out weeks ago. George had replaced it. "For emergencies. But don't you dare drink it unless the world's actually ending." Bob unscrewed the cap. Maybe the world was ending. His world, anyway. The psych report would say he was unstable. The judge would use it to justify supervised visitation permanently. Tyler and Emma would grow up believing their father was dangerous. Linda would get the house, the kids, everything, and Marcus would win. Bob raised the bottle. Then his phone buzzed. A photo from Tyler. No text, just an image. Bob opened it. A composition notebook. Tyler's handwriting on the cover. "Things Mom said. Private." The first page was visible in the photo. "October 15th. Mom told us to say Dad yelled all the time. She said if we don't, Mr. Marcus will leave and we'll be poor again." Bob set down the bottle. Read the message again. Tyler had been documenting the whole time, every coached statement, every manipulation, every lie Linda told them to tell. A second text came through. "I've been writing everything down since she left. Just like you taught me. Document everything. Don't quit, Dad." Bob's hands shook. He texted back, "I won't, I promise." He picked up the whiskey bottle, walked to George's back door, knocked. George answered, saw the bottle, saw Bob's face. "You drinking or dumping?" "Dumping." Bob handed it over. "I got work to do." "That's my boy." George took the bottle. "What changed?" Bob showed him Tyler's photo. George read it. His eyes went hard. "That son of a bitch. She coached them. And my son's been building the case against her the whole time. Smart kid. Wonder where he got that from." Bob almost smiled. "Almost. George, I need your help. I need to get that notebook. I need to prove what she's been doing." "How?" "You can't ask Tyler to bring it to supervised visitation. The social worker would confiscate it." Bob thought, then we don't ask. We wait. And when the time is right, Tyler will know what to do. That's a gamble. Everything about this is a gamble. Bob looked at his friend. "But I'm all in now." The full custody hearing was set for January 15th. Bob had 3 weeks to build his case. Kevin Morrison worked weekends. Sarah flew in from Denver, brought boxes of documents from her own custody battle 15 years ago, showing the same pattern, the same coached statements, the same accusations. George called in favors. His buddy in medical records pulled Linda's treatment files. They showed something interesting. Her final chemo session was September 3rd. Her first appointment with Dr. Chen, the cosmetic surgery psychiatrist, was September 10th, 7 days between surviving cancer and planning her new face. Rita provided her timeline, conversations overheard, Marcus bragging about insurance fraud, Linda laughing about Bob never seeing it coming. And then Diane Chen called Kevin's office. Diane Chen, the lawyer, not the psychiatrist. The parental alienation specialist George had mentioned weeks ago. Mr. Morrison, I've reviewed your case files. I'd like to offer my services pro bono. Kevin put her on speaker. Why? Because I've seen this pattern before. And because Rita Delgado is my aunt, she called me. Diane's voice was steel. I specialize in cases where wealthy men use the system to steal children. But it works both ways. When wealthy men help women do it, someone needs to fight back. She joined the team. January 15th arrived cold and clear. The courtroom was packed. Linda sat with Christine Waverly and Marcus. She wore gray, professional, sympathetic, cancer survivor playing the victim. Bob sat with Kevin, Diane, Sarah, and George in the row behind. Judge Patricia Kerrigan entered, the same judge who'd granted the restraining order. Bob's stomach dropped, but then she spoke. Before we begin, I want to address the bias complaint filed by the defense. After review, I'm recusing myself from this case. Judge Ronald Martinez will be presiding. Christine Waverly stood. Your Honor, we object. My decision is final. Kerrigan gathered her files and left. 10 minutes later, Judge Martinez entered. 70 years old, former prosecutor, no connection to Marcus Thornton. The hearing began. Christine Waverly presented first. The same accusations: emotional abuse, financial control, instability. She called Dr. Webb, who testified that Bob showed signs of depression and resentment. Then Diane Chen stood for cross-examination. Dr. Webb, how long was your evaluation of Mr. Hendricks? 2 hours. And in those 2 hours, did you review any of his medical records, employment history, references from people who've known him for decades? The evaluation focused on his current mental state. Did you know that Mr. Hendricks worked 2 jobs for 6 months to pay for his wife's cancer treatment? That wasn't relevant to my assessment. Did you know he's been attending church, working steadily, and maintaining relationships with friends and neighbors? Dr. Webb shifted. I assessed what I observed. What you observed in a 2-hour session, scheduled by a man who plays golf with Marcus Thornton. Diane's voice was calm, deadly. No further questions. Next, Kevin called Sarah to the stand. She testified about Linda's pattern. 15 years ago, the same accusations against Bob, the same coached statements, the same manipulation that destroyed Sarah's relationship with her father. I lost 15 years with my dad because I believed her lies, Sarah said, voice breaking. I won't let her do that to Tyler and Emma. Linda's face went white. Then Diane called the forensic accountant. He presented the mortgage documents, showed that every single dollar, went to medical expenses, hospital bills, clinical trials, specialists. There's no evidence of financial abuse, he testified. Mr. Hendricks bankrupted himself to save his wife's life. Christine Waverly tried to object. The judge overruled. Finally, Diane stood. Your Honor, we have one more piece of evidence, submitted this morning by Tyler Hendricks, age 14. She held up Tyler's notebook. Linda stood. That's private property. Sit down, Mrs. Hendricks, Judge Martinez said. Diane opened the notebook. Read excerpts. October 15th, coach to say dad yelled. October 22nd, told to say dad was mean during cancer. November 3rd, Marcus said if they didn't cooperate, they'd regret it. Page after page, months of documentation, a 14-year-old boy building a case against his own mother. The courtroom was silent. Judge Martinez looked at Linda. Do you deny these allegations? Linda's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. I was trying to protect them. By coaching them to lie? Marcus stood. Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement. Mr. Thornton, you're not a party to this case. Sit down. Marcus's lawyer grabbed his arm, pulled him back. Then the doors opened. A federal agent entered, badge visible. Marcus Thornton, you're under arrest for insurance fraud and falsifying medical records. The courtroom erupted. The judge gavelled for order. Federal agents led Marcus out in handcuffs, his lawyer scrambling behind. Linda sat frozen, face drained of color. Judge Martinez waited until the room quieted. Mrs. Hendricks, I'm granting full custody to Mr. Hendricks, effective immediately. Linda's head snapped up. You can't. I can and I will. You coached your children to lie under oath. You falsified statements. You participated in insurance fraud. He looked at her over his reading glasses. You're lucky you're not in handcuffs yourself. But the house will be resolved in asset division proceedings. But given that the mortgage was taken fraudulently with your knowledge, I suspect Mr. Hendricks will retain ownership. He turned to Bob. Mr. Hendricks, you'll have full physical custody. Mrs. Hendricks will have supervised visitation pending further review. Linda stood, wild-eyed. Those children need their mother. Those children need a parent who doesn't teach them to lie. The judge's voice was granite. We're adjourned. The gavel fell. Bob stood outside the courthouse, unable to move. Sarah hugged him. George clapped his shoulder. Diane shook his hand. Kevin was already on the phone with social services, arranging for the kids to be released. 30 minutes later, Tyler and Emma came through the courthouse doors. They saw Bob and ran. He caught them both, dropped to his knees, held them like he'd never let go. Tyler was crying. Emma was crying. Bob was crying. I'm sorry, Dad, Tyler sobbed. I'm sorry I said those things. You did what you had to do. You survived, and you documented everything. Bob pulled back, looked his son in the eyes. You were braver than I ever was. Emma pressed her face into his shoulder. Can we go home? Yeah, baby. We can go home. They walked to the truck together, the same beat-up Ford that had carried them through everything. On the drive back, Tyler asked, What happens to Mom? Bob chose his words carefully. She'll face consequences, but she's still your mom. You can still love her. Even after what she did? Especially after what she did. Because forgiveness isn't about her, it's about you. They pulled into the driveway, their home. Emma looked up at Bob. Is it over? Bob thought about the legal battles ahead. The asset division. Linda's visitation. Rebuilding trust. Healing wounds. No, he said honestly, but we'll get through it together. And for the first time in months, he believed it. Spring came early that year. Bob sat on the porch with his morning coffee, watching Tyler and Emma kick a soccer ball in the yard. Sarah was inside making breakfast. She'd moved back, helping with the transition. George walked over with his unlit pipe. How you doing? Getting there, Bob said. The truth was messier than that. Some nights, Emma still cried for her mother. Tyler struggled with guilt. The house felt different now, haunted by what had been lost, but they were together. That was something. You know what I learned? Bob said. Silence isn't strength. Documentation is. Speaking up is. Accepting help is. George nodded. Took you long enough. Emma's laugh carried across the yard. Tyler chased her, both of them whole and healing. Bob thought about the men listening to his story, the ones fighting their own battles, wondering if truth still mattered. It does, he said quietly. Truth still wins. Sometimes it just takes longer than you'd like. The coffee was good. The morning was peaceful. That was enough. That